now, and you should be able to hear us. Can you hear us there, Sheriff?
Michael, I think I can hear you okay. Thanks.
All right, I hear you perfect as well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Just to let people know, the sheriff is working on, there's an incident that's ongoing, and so that's part of why he was delayed in reaching us. And I do understand if things get a little more active there, we may lose you, so I do understand. You with me, Sheriff?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. So, Sheriff, a couple things. For people who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about your background? I always like to hear it from the horse's mouth directly.
Well, yeah, that's quite a story in and of itself. But I grew up the son of an FBI agent, and I tried to get in the FBI. That didn't work out. So while I was working my way through college, I was a part-time cadet at the police department in Provo, Utah, and decided to stay on there full-time and tried to make myself more attractive to the FBI while I was working law enforcement. Then I decided to stay there. I really loved the department. I loved the work. And I did a stint as an undercover narcotics agent back in 1982. My career really shot up after that. I was promoted to school resource officer, and then after that, corporal, front desk sergeant, detective, patrol sergeant, public relations officer, and then after that, in 1988, I moved home to Arizona and ran for sheriff and was elected twice. And in 1994, I started a movement to fight the Brady Bill. The Brady Bill was the first law in history where the federal government and the president attempted to commandeer sheriffs across the country for federal bidding to enforce the Brady handgun control law. And I said, there's two things wrong with the Brady Bill. One, it's gun control, and I took an oath to oppose gun control when I said I would uphold and defend the Constitution. Second, the federal government doesn't have any authority or power to tell your sheriff what to do. Your sheriff does not work for the federal government. He does not take orders from Congress or the president. He works for the people of his respective county. And 6 other sheriffs joined me in that lawsuit. We went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we won. After that, I lost my third bid to be sheriff. And after that, I went on the lecture circuit. I wrote 8 books. And now I'm a high school teacher, and I'm an activist for freedom, and I chair the Neighborhood Alliance PAC, which is trying to get the nation to focus on arming our schools with teachers, with volunteers, former special ops, or former military people, former cops. It doesn't matter. We need to arm our schools, and that's what I'm about now.
All right. And thank you for that summary and catching us up with what's been going on. You've had quite the life, very much an active supporter of the Second Amendment, and we thank you for that, and protecting our rights. I know that you have a very absolute position on the Second Amendment, that the government cannot tell us we cannot defend ourselves, our homes, and our families. And I applaud that. I agree with you on that. I do want to talk about the Neighborhood Alliance PAC in just a moment, but one of the things that I've been talking about, and I'm a major advocate of the Second Amendment as well, and I'm very much against these red flag laws. I'm not sure, did you see or have you read about the Senate Judiciary hearing on a national red flag law?
Well, there's been so many going on in states. I'm not sure which one that one is, but there's so many attempts. And as you probably know, there's 22,000 gun control laws in our country, 99% of them unconstitutional. Congress has no authority whatsoever to regulate the Second Amendment or to regulate that which is guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. So it never ceases to amaze me how unconstitutional our own Congress is. But the red flag laws going on in Washington, New Mexico, Maryland, and Nevada have sheriffs there, constitutional sheriffs that are standing against it and who have come out publicly, even written, a few of them have written letters to their governors and other public officials saying that they are not going to enforce these unconstitutional gun laws. And that's what really part of the movement that I started. In fact, I started entirely the constitutional sheriff movement. And we need more constitutional peace officers and sheriffs in this country to do just that, because we have legislatures throughout the country, our own federal Congress and our state legislatures as well, who simply refuse to follow the Constitution, not just regarding the Second Amendment, but many other issues as well, but primarily the Second Amendment. And so which one you're talking about right now, I'm sure I've heard of it, but I cannot put my finger on the precise one you're mentioning.
Not a problem. Many of them they all have the same core ideology with different additions to it or subtractions. Essentially, we're talking about the ability of an individual or law enforcement to say someone is a danger to themselves and or their community, and because of that, to receive a warrant to take their property, and as a consequence, to take the children out of the home since it's too dangerous, even though no crime has ever been committed. That's the core of all red flag legislation.
Yes, I did hear about that one. Yes, I absolutely did. And it's just frightening to see legislators who have no clue what they're talking about actually put law enforcement in that position. And another thing that's very difficult, if not impossible, and in some states illegal, for law enforcement to access mental history records.
Oh, yes.
It actually was against the law in Arizona. I don't think they've changed it since then. But when I was sheriff and they came out with the Brady Bill, we were supposed to, according to the Brady Bill, check all criminal history and mental history records. Well, at the time, those were protected, and it was against the law, and so our own federal government was trying to get us to break the law, and so that was another thing I refused to do. I wasn't going to break the law for them, and we all know how Janet Reno and Bill Clinton didn't care if you violated the law, because their agenda for gun control, they wanted to convince everybody that that was more important. So it's really difficult for law enforcement to make that determination. And it's really difficult for law enforcement also to just follow the whims of a CPS officer, CPS agent, who they're not police officers, and yet they want us to just go and do whatever they say, and we don't work for them. And so if a counselor or a doctor or, like I said, a CPS worker, if they want us to go and enter a home just on their say-so, that puts us again in a very precarious position, and it opens us up for a lot of civil liability that we simply cannot afford. And so we're taking law enforcement to the next level of trying to enforce these rules and regulations, and we really have no business doing so.
Let me ask you, Sheriff Mack, in your knowledgeable experience, and especially with your work with the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, which has helped to put well over 120 counties across the country fighting against these kinds of unconstitutional laws for gun restrictions. Let me ask you, especially in reference to the red flag legislation, one of my arguments against it is that this is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. It's a violation of the cruel and unusual punishment. What do you think?
Well, the Eighth Amendment, I think, is one of the most forgotten and ignored amendments in the entire Constitution. Because I think if law enforcement actually paid attention to it, that we would see the other part of that amendment that you just quoted, and that is excessive fines and bail.
Yes, that's true.
I think that if we actually adhered to the Eighth Amendment, we would have to diminish by about 90% the traffic citations we issue, because they are excessive in the frequency that we write them, and they're excessive, way excessive, in the amount of the actual fine involved, especially if you get cited for anything in California. You're looking at on the average, the average ticket in California is about $700.
Ow.
And in Arizona, a simple speeding ticket is about $275.
That hurts too.
And I believe all that is excessive, and especially for young people who are just starting out in life and trying to get a job, and average families who are just living paycheck to paycheck, and then you get some police officer writing a $275 ticket, and especially the tickets that are so unconstitutional, that are photo radar and photo red light tickets, where the officer who goes to court to, if you contest the ticket, which I suggest everybody does, if you do contest the ticket, then an officer is there testifying who was not even there and did not see the violation occur. And you have a right to face your accusers as guaranteed in the Constitution. So we continuously, in order to make our police revenue collectors instead of peacekeepers and guards of the Constitution and guards of the Republic, we keep turning them into revenue agents. And that's one of the things that actually motivated me to run for sheriff, because I was so sick and tired of being in an apartment that everything was numbers oriented instead of people oriented and freedom oriented. And that's really where we're at today. The entire law enforcement community has been brainwashed into believing that our job is to kick in doors, arrest everybody we can, arrest all the potheads and drug users, fill up our prisons, and write as many tickets as we can, and then we're doing our job. We're supposed to be service-oriented. We are here to protect and serve, and we're here to serve the people, not be their taskmasters and tax collectors, but we're here to really serve them and protect their individual liberties. And we just have gotten so far away from that, and that's why I hope that all your listeners will get involved with us at the CSPOA, because I'm telling you, the sheriffs that are standing right now are doing so because they have heard from their constituents, and the constituents know what we're doing at the CSPOA. And so, yes, I highly encourage you and all your listeners to become members of the CSPOA, and you can do that at CSPOA.org. Stands for Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org.
Okay. And I'm glad that you brought that up, and I do have it on the screen, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a moment. I also, while we have you, and since it is something that you did just start, and it's kind of an offshoot of what you had done in the past, which is the Neighborhood Alliance PAC. Now, you have a very unique perspective. As a former member of law enforcement, a current high school teacher, there's obviously a big discussion throughout the nation about how to best protect children. And I know that the Parkland shooting, there was a report done on they spent a year doing an analysis. It came out in January, late December or January. And their analysis said that there should be an increase in the number of service resource officers, and they should be armed. What do you see as an answer, and how does the Neighborhood Alliance PAC help to make our children safer?
Well, we hope to create a dialogue in the country with all police agencies and sheriff's offices, between the schools and the communities, parents, teachers, and students alike. As a matter of fact, I'd really like to talk to some of these students who started campaigning for more gun control, who are literally brainwashed into believing that more gun control is going to keep us safer. And nothing could be further from the truth. And I'd really like to be able to sit down with them and discuss that with them. Because even if you were able to create some sort of gun control and make a law, let's say, Michael, let's say we make a law tomorrow to get rid of AR-15.
Right.
Does anybody know logistically how long that would take us to accomplish that feat? There's no way that you're going to ever get rid of all of them.
No.
There's no way you're going to get them away from the criminal element in our society. They're not going to turn them in. For police or police agencies to pretend to the public, or for politicians to pretend to the public that we can go out door to door and confiscate these weapons so that everybody's going to be safer. You're looking at, even if you could do any of that, you're looking 2 to 5 years to even get it started. And then in the meantime, are we going to be preventing or decreasing the amount of shootings we're having in public places, and specifically our schools? It's not an immediate solution. It's not going to take effect immediately. There's no way it can decrease shootings. And then what if they got rid of all assault rifles, that they call it? Okay, so then let's say only pistols can be used for any of these types of shootings. You're going to still have the shootings.
Oh, yeah.
So the only way you can get rid of the shootings or decrease the shootings is to get rid of all guns. And that's really what their intent is, but it's still not going to happen. There's over 350 million guns in America. You're not going to get rid of them. You can't even keep them out of prisons or jails or courtrooms or schools.
True.
There's just no way logistically that you can go and pick up all these guns. Okay, but I'm willing to listen to any of these students and people who say that that's going to keep us safer. Okay, so how about let's look at the history and the facts, Michael?
I agree.
And I know that you're aware of a lot of this, but let's go over the facts. Start with the shootings that started in the 80s, work your way up to the present time, and examine all of the horrendous shootings that we've had. You could look at the one in New Zealand recently. You can look at the one in Las Vegas last year. You can look at Parkland. You can look at Sandy Hook in Connecticut. You can look at Columbine in Denver. You can just look at all of them. Every single time, it produced 4 results from the shooter, from this heinous, coward nutcase. In every case, that's what they are.
Yes.
Especially cowards.
Yes.
That they know they're going to be shooting at people who cannot defend themselves. Every single time, 4 things happen. As soon as they hear that the police are there or a citizen is there with a gun, as soon as they see or hear that somebody's coming after them with a gun, they either shoot themselves, engage the police or the citizen and get shot and usually killed. They either run away or they give up. Those 4 things happen immediately. So then we have to examine how long does it take our police to respond to any of those shooting incidents. And that, my friend, is the horrible statistic. It's 5 to 10 minutes. By the time they actually engage the shooter, it's about 12 to 15 minutes. And so this is really a horrible scenario to deal with when you determine how many people can die in those 10 minutes. and they've done it. In fact, I'm surprised that a lot more people were not killed in these incidents.
No,
because you know the rate, how fast people can pull a trigger, or if it's an automatic, it's even worse. So this is the thing. What do we, as a community, as law enforcement, as politicians, what should we be looking at? Look at the evidence, look at the facts, look at each scenario and see what motivates the shooter to stop. And every single time, it's somebody with a gun. So how do we decrease that 10-minute time frame before the police actually get engaged with the suspect? We have somebody there that already has access to a weapon. That, my friends, is the reason we have Neighborhood Alliance PAC, because we want to tell everybody the truth. We want to increase the number of, decrease the number of people assaulted and killed and wounded. And if we respond immediately within the school or within the building where it's happening, we can decrease by 90% the people who die at such incidents. And can you just imagine a suspect being surprised by 4 or 5 teachers surrounding him or confronting him with a weapon? And I'm telling you, I don't want to ever be a part of something like that, because I watch students get shot, and what we're telling them, instead of somebody defending their lives and stopping the carnage, is we tell them to hide in the room in a corner.
Yeah.
And if the suspect is allowed in there, he shoots everybody in the corner.
I know.
And I don't want to face that anymore. I don't think it's proper. I don't think it's going to help one iota. But I can tell you, if you look at the history of all of this and the facts, you have to increase the speed at which somebody confronts the suspect with a gun.
No, I agree with you completely, Sheriff Mack. I mean, the data is very clear. You're right. It's usually the largest number of people are usually within the first minute and a half of an incident. The sooner you can get there, the more dramatically you reduce it. Looking at Texas, when there was the church shooting and the gun instructor confronted that shooter with his own AR-15, that ended that incident instantly. And we see that repeatedly. And that's probably why Parkland has armed officers now patrolling, and their recommendation was for the rest of the state to follow suit. So I agree with you completely. We only have
now one other thing. People have been. This subject is not all that new. Our PAC is new, and that we want to really press this issue across the country. So people have been wanting to know how they can help with this, and just go to our website, Neighborhood Alliance PAC. That's PAC. So neighborhoodalliancepac.com, and make a donation, get on our mailing list, get involved in this, go to your local schools, go to your local legislatures, and get involved in making sure that we can change the law where this isn't allowed at this point. And let's try a real effective self-defense methodology that's going to save the lives of our children.
No, I agree
with you. I mean, there's been 4 or 5 of these incidents where a citizen actually confronted the suspect and put an end to a lot of the killing. It's happened even in a church where an off-duty female officer did it. Then it was done at a school before where a teacher ran out to his car and got a gun.
Yeah.
Imagine how many students, and I believe that was Alabama, imagine how many students are being killed while he's chasing down his gun outside. And I'll add something else too, Michael.
Sure.
I don't really want to carry a gun at school. I carried a gun for 20 years. I don't mind carrying a gun, but I really don't want to have one on my person in the school. They're bulky. They're difficult to conceal. They get in the way. I don't want to have a student try to take one away from me, but I do want to have one that is very handy and in a very strategic location. And all the teachers who are trained must have access immediately to a weapon that is strategically placed within the school where nobody knows it's there except for us. The principal, the assistant principal, and those of us who are trained to defend the school and the kids, we're the only ones that are going to know where the gun is. And even if somebody found where the gun was, it would be locked up and secured to the point where only we can access it. And I like the locks and those that respond to your fingerprint or immediately are opened by the person who is allowed to open it. So I say let's do it that way. If somebody wants to carry it on their person, I'm not against that. If a teacher doesn't want to do this and doesn't want to be trained to defend the kids, that's fine too. But nobody's going to be forced to do it. But there's plenty of people who've been in the military, several, of course, teachers who've been in law enforcement or have been trained in firearms, or people who really want to do this and want to be trained. There's no magic in police academies or other facilities that train police. You know what? We're all citizens, and we teach citizens how to do this. And there's nothing wrong with teaching public officials and teachers how to do this and to be ready, to be prepared, and let everyone know we are not a gun-free zone. If you come here, we will shoot back.
No, I think that's an important message, and I do agree with you on all of those aspects. I think it's very important that we have to take it. We've, as you mentioned, over 22,000 gun laws exist. We've been doing the same process for the last 40 years after each of these incidents, and we had another 128 additional laws added just in the last year, and none of them are working. Let's try a new approach, and I think you have a very good answer there. I know we're out of time, and I know you're working on something, so I do thank you for breaking up that incident, the situation you have ongoing, and I hope it works out well for you. But I do want to thank you.
Well, thanks.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate being on with you, Michael. Sorry it was late, but thank you so much, and let's do it again. And again, let me give that website out. It's Neighborhood Alliance PAC.com. Neighborhood Alliance PAC.com.
Absolutely. I've also got it on the screen, and I'll include it in the notes. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon, hopefully on much better news. Say we're defeated, but we'll definitely be in touch again. Okay?
All right. Well, thanks, Michael. See you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. And that was Sheriff Richard Mack talking about his work with the Neighborhood Alliance PAC, talking about his efforts and what he's seeing in the schools and how best to protect our children, how best to protect our rights, and to protect the Second Amendment, as well as the Eighth Amendment, and how all these things are all interconnected. And that's important. So I'm glad we had a chance. I know it was a little bit later than we expected, and I know he's working on a project as we were speaking, but I'm glad we had the chance to talk to him. We're going to look forward to speaking with him again soon, but we're going to take a quick break now, an actual full break, and then we'll come back and we'll go on to what I think is very interesting about what's going on in the 2020 race.